Let's stop lying to ourselves for just 1 minute. The global debate over abortion isn't about morality, and it's definitely not about saving babies. It is the most successful psychological operation in modern history, designed to keep you fighting over womb ownership while the system robs you blind. Think you're pro-choice? You've been tricked into defending corporate interests. Think you're pro-life? You're acting as an unpaid enforcer for state control. You are trapped in an intellectual circus. And it gets worse. If you live in New York, London, or Sydney, you've been fed a clean, sanitized narrative. Pro-choice activists call it simple healthcare, as if terminating a potential life is treated no differently than a routine medical removal. It's a cold, clinical lie that completely ignores the heavy psychological and biological gravity of conception. But the alternative is even more terrifying. Because the moment you give the state the right to criminalize a woman's uterus, you are legally establishing that a citizen's body can be conscripted as a biological incubator against their will. But here's the part they hide. When the Supreme Court weaponized the Dobbs v. Jackson decision and killed Roe v. Wade, they didn't just change a law. They triggered a calculated legal domino effect. Overnight, the line between private anatomy and government property dissolved. If a cluster of cells has the legal status of a full human being, then an uncompleted pregnancy becomes a potential state investigation. Your search history, your period tracker apps, your private text messages, they are all instantly converted into state evidence. This is where it breaks. The pro-life crowd celebrates this as a victory for God and human rights. But let's look at the cold, hard economic data they conveniently ignore. The states banning abortion are the exact same regions with the lowest funding for child health care, zero mandatory paid maternity leave, and the highest infant mortality rates in the developed world. The system demands that the child must be born, but the second it breathes American air, they abandon it to the free market. It's not pro-life, it's pro-birth forced labor. But that's not the real problem. So why is the establishment so obsessed with your reproductive choices? Because a falling birth rate is an absolute nightmare for the corporate elite. They don't care about the sanctity of life. They care about the future supply of low-wage workers and consumer debt holders. By banning abortion, they are artificially manufacturing the next generation of taxpayers to fund their failing pension systems. You've been weaponized into an emotional culture war, completely blind to the fact that your body is being treated as an economic factory. This is the real trap. This is the ultimate intellectual deadlock. If you support total freedom, you must accept the ethical weight of ending what millions believe is a human life. If you support the restriction, you must accept that you are handing the government absolute ownership over your skin and bones. There is no moral high ground here. Everyone is compromised. And what we are about to uncover next in the actual data will prove that both sides have been completely played. Because when you look at the raw numbers behind who actually funds these laws, the mask drops entirely. Forget the protest signs. Let's look at the ledger. In the US, UK, and across the West, we are facing a demographic winter. Our birth rates have plummeted below the replacement level of 2.1. Why does this matter to the men in suits? Because the entire global economy is a giant Ponzi scheme that requires a constant stream of new taxpayers to pay off the interest on our massive national debts. If the cradle stops rocking, the stock market stops climbing. And it gets worse. Here is the data point no politician will say out loud. An unwanted child is, statistically, an economic goldmine for the state. Every birth is a fresh injection of human capital. In the U.S., it costs roughly $300,000 to raise a child to age 17. That is $300,000 of guaranteed consumer spending, fueled by debt, diapers, and education. By banning abortion, the state isn't saving a soul. It's securing a future consumer. But no one tells you this. Look at the timing. Why did the Supreme Court strike now? Look at the Great Resignation and the labor shortage in Tier 1 nations. We are running out of low-wage workers to staff the warehouses and flip the burgers. If you provide easy access to reproductive care, people make rational choices to wait for financial stability. By removing that choice, you force a population increase in the most economically vulnerable sectors. You aren't creating a culture of life. You're creating a surplus of labor. This is where it breaks. Let's talk about the replacement theory that actually matters. In 2023, for the first time in history, the cost of the aging population, Social Security and pensions, began to outpace the tax revenue from the current workforce. The system is starving for fresh blood to keep the pension funds from collapsing. When you ban abortion, you aren't protecting morality. You are literally farming the next generation of debt payers to bail out the boomer generation's retirement. But that's not the real problem. The data reveals a chilling correlation. States with the strictest abortion bans also have the highest rates of medical debt. In the U.S., a hospital birth can cost between $10,000 and $30,000. By forcing birth, the healthcare industry secures an immediate, massive windfall of debt before the child even takes its first breath. It's the ultimate subscription model. You're not a citizen. You're an 18-year revenue stream. This is the real trap. And if you think this is a conservative versus liberal issue, check the donor lists. The same massive investment firms that fund pro-choice candidates are the ones buying up the residential real estate in the states that ban abortion. Why? Because they know those states will have a higher density of desperate, low-income families who have no choice but to rent forever. They are building a literal serfdom, using your reproductive organs as the foundation. And it gets worse.
We've been arguing about the sanctity of life and bodily autonomy while the accountants were calculating the ROI of your uterus. This isn't a theological debate. It's an audit. And according to the data, a free woman is an economic liability, but a forced mother is an economic engine. It's the most cold-blooded math in human history. And what you're about to see next is worse. Because we need to find out who actually pushed the button to start this war. And it's not the people you see on the news.
Let's stop arguing about ideology and look at the actual receipts. The brutal truth behind the abortion war is documented in the cold, hard archives of global finance. In 2022, right before the Supreme Court dismantled Roe v. Wade, a leaked internal memo from a major Wall Street analyst pointed out a terrifying reality. Abortion bans were a direct mechanism to restock the domestic labor market, which was starving from a historic lack of low-wage workers. This isn't a holy war. It's an unvarnished human resource operation. And it gets worse. Look at the empirical evidence on the ground. If you track the states in America that rush to enforce total abortion bans, like Texas and Mississippi, you will find an undeniable correlation. These exact same states immediately push to deregulate child labor laws and consistently maintain the lowest minimum wages in the developed world. The system isn't protecting the sanctity of life. The system is legally safeguarding a cheap, compliant future workforce for local corporate monopolies. but no one tells you this.
But don't look at the conservative lobby alone. The progressive corporate complex is playing the exact same calculated game, just with a different accounting formula. If you audit the public financial disclosures of major tech giants and Fortune 500 banks, you will see a fascinating paradox. The very same companies that loudly fund pro-choice advocacy are the ones offering to pay $4,000 for an employee's out-of-state abortion travel expense. Do you honestly think they care about a woman's right to choose? This is where it breaks.
Do the basic math. Covering a one-time medical intervention expense is infinitely cheaper for a multi-billion-dollar corporation than funding 6 months of paid maternity leave, covering corporate healthcare expansions for a newborn, and losing thousands in employee productivity. The corporate boardrooms don't hate abortion. They love it because it keeps women on the factory floor and off the maternity grid. You are being celebrated for autonomy while being optimized for quarterly profit margins. But that's not the real problem.
This is the ultimate cold-blooded institutional deadlock. If you analyze the donor registries of the Federal Election Commission, you will find that the exact same Wall Street hedge funds invest millions into both pro-life and pro-choice political action committees simultaneously. They fund the restriction to secure long-term demographic taxpayers, and they fund the opposition to maintain immediate corporate workforce efficiency. They don't care who wins the culture war, because they own both sides of the asset sheet. This is the real trap.
We are not witnesses to a moral debate. We are cogs inside a giant, self-sustaining financial machine. If you abort, a corporation saves immediate overhead. If you give birth, the state bails out its collapsing national debt infrastructure. The system has calculated your anatomy down to the last decimal point. And just when you think you've figured out how to fight back against this algorithmic trap, the entire board is about to flip. Because what the next phase of this architecture is preparing to do to human reproduction makes the current laws look completely obsolete.
While you are hyper-focused on the legal theater of the courts, the definition of human birth is being quietly rewritten inside biotech laboratories. This entire toxic debate between pro-life and pro-choice is about to become completely obsolete. Scientists in the US, Europe, and Australia have already successfully gestated mammalian embryos entirely outside the biological body. This isn't science fiction anymore. It's called ectogenesis, the functional artificial womb, and it changes absolutely everything.
Think about the devastating legal paradox this tech creates. The entire foundation of the pro-choice movement relies on bodily autonomy, the absolute right to remove an unwanted entity from your private anatomy. But the moment artificial wombs hit the commercial market, that argument vaporizes. The state will no longer force you to be pregnant. They will simply extract the fetus and transfer it into a corporate machine. Your bodily autonomy is fully respected, yet you lose all control over whether that child is born. This is where it breaks.
But if you think the conservative, pro-life camp wins this round, you are dead wrong. The pro-life philosophy is built on the sacred, spiritual connection of human creation. What happens to that morality when human reproduction is entirely productionized at an industrial scale? When a billionaire or a tech monopoly can literally order 10,000 human infants from a factory line to offset falling national birth rates, the unborn child ceases to be a miracle. It becomes a licensed product with a corporate patent. But here's the part they hide. This shifts the war from a battle over human rights to an absolute monopoly over human code. If a machine carries the child, who legally owns the parental rights during those 9 months? The genetic donors? The tech company operating the hardware? Or the venture capital firms funding the facility? We are trading the moral tyranny of the state for the raw, unadulterated property laws of Wall Street. This is the real trap. We've spent decades screaming at each other over ancient laws, completely blind to the fact that the tech elite were building a bypass around the female body entirely. The future isn't about protecting women or saving babies. The future is about completely decoupling humanity from biology so that the economic machine can run without human limitations. You are fighting for your side of the coin while they are changing the currency. But that's not the real problem. So look closely at the shouting matches on your screen today. It is a carefully curated distraction to keep your mind trapped in the past, while the infrastructure for a post-biological world is laid right under your feet. The old world of reproductive rights is already dead. The new world is a corporate boardroom, and your consent was never part of the business plan. Because when the machine takes over the womb, you are no longer a citizen. You are just a legacy model.
So here we stand, stripped of all the comforting political fairy tales. The data proves it isn't about morality. The evidence shows it's an engineered resource war. And the technology guarantees that your current opinions will soon mean absolutely nothing. We are rapidly moving toward a world where your most sacred biological destiny is either owned by the state balance sheet or patented by a corporate tech monopoly. There is no third option. The exit doors have been locked. This forces a brutal, binary choice upon your conscience, and your response defines exactly what kind of future you are willing to tolerate. If you choose to accept the state-sanctioned ownership of human anatomy just to preserve a traditional moral order, you are officially signing the deed to your own biological slavery. But if you choose to accept corporate industrial manufacturing of life just to preserve individual freedom, you are officially sanctioning the commodification of human flesh.
There is no neutral ground left to hide on. You are either a property of the system or a customer of the factory. Pick your master. Or prove to everyone else that you're just another blind passenger on a ship that has already sailed.